Hi, my name is Bill Keogh. I'm the Managing Director of the Supply Chain, Transportation, and Logistics Master's Program here at the University of Washington. I'm also an Associate Professor teaching several classes in the program. I've been a supply chain and operations consultant for about 20 years, working for companies like IBM, Computer Sciences Corporation, and then working on my own, helping out private equity firms who have portfolio companies with challenges. This is Mike Williams. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yes, hello, Mike Williams, and happy to be here and spend some time with you today. I've been in the supply chain field for 15 years, started my career at a Toyota manufacturing facility for the first 10 years. Then made a career transition and led humanitarian supply chain for 5 years, and then I'm now senior product manager at Amazon.
Great. Well, we can hear a little bit more about what you do a little bit later on. So tell us a little bit about what made you want to select this particular program in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew that I wanted to obtain a graduate degree, and for me it was about how do I continue my learning. I've been in supply chain at that time for 13 years, and my undergrad is in business administration, and in my career I had the opportunity to lead several supply chains, so I felt like I had a good foundation in business administration and how to lead supply chains from the business side. And in the graduate degree, I looked at weighing an MBA versus a master's in supply chain. And for me, because of my background in business administration and my years of being in the field of supply chain, I wanted to deepen my supply chain experience and really gain a foundation in supply chain theory from an academic standpoint. I felt that adding that component provided a foundation that was missing for me.
Also, I think this program is a little bit more focused. Maybe it's not just supply chain, but there's sort of a focus on logistics that you might not find some other programs offer, sort of a master's in supply chain. Yeah. Did that play into the decision in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So this degree program for me really fit not only supply chain, but the transportation logistics aspects as well. So you really get to understand really the core components that make up the supply chain to include the transportation and logistics aspects.
Great. Because transportation is all about sort of what happens on each end, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How much inventory do you hold,
right.
all that kind of thing.
Yes.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, I think for somebody, you obviously have a family and a lot of commitments, a job that requires a lot of hours every week. How did you manage going back to school, being a grad student? How did you balance all those different obligations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a husband and a father, and a full-time job, and worked during the program. So my wife was in grad school as well, and she was in a traditional brick and mortar school where she had to be on campus twice a week. So I knew I didn't want to wait to obtain my degree. So I needed to have a hybrid type of program so that I could join remotely, whether that's from work or from home. So for me, it was really about how can I commit for 2 years to be able to put the time into study and to put the time into also network with fellow students and faculty and board members as well. So it's really about, if it's important to you, how are you going to carve out the 2 hours a week for class and then the hours that you need to study and prepare as well. So for me, it was about going into it, knowing it was going to be a commitment of time and carving out intentionally that time to study and to prepare.
Great. I think one of the things when we were designing the program that I personally felt was important, some online programs, it's sort of an asynchronous exchange. And I thought it was really important that there be sort of live interaction and that at the beginning you actually meet the professors, you meet the students, you meet our advisory board. Maybe you could say a little bit about your experience with residency week when you actually come to campus with the rest of your cohort.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I made the decision to obtain a master's in supply chain, I also needed a hybrid program as well. And when I went to look at different programs, there was a mix of programs from all asynchronous to where you watch a video, read a book, and write a paper. And then very few programs had the synchronous session. So for me, I wanted it to be interactive. I wanted to know my professors. I wanted to know the board members and the other students. And the UW SCTL program really fit that for me. The first week of the program kicks off with a residency week, so all of the students from around the world come to the University of Washington and spend a week in class, spend a week in networking with other professionals, the board, and faculty as well. So you really get an opportunity not only to kickstart your degree program, but you also get a chance to network and learn more about the students that you'll be working with for the next 2 years.
Yeah, and I think having met somebody in person
Yes.
and then working with them is a lot different than having only seen them over.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with this degree program for me, as we all know, in the global landscape of the businesses that we work in now, you're always engaging with collaborative workspaces. You're on different platforms where you're engaging digitally. So for me, the technology that this program uses was really seamless for me, and you have that real-time interaction. You get that real-time feedback and can talk and interact with the other students and the professors as well.
All right, great. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think for some people it's a little bit hard to imagine.
Yeah.
How do you have a live class
Sure.
when you're over the internet?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is get a bigger monitor. So I recommend a 30-inch monitor. So the Adobe Connect platform really gives you flexibility in how you view your virtual classroom. So you have a section where you can take notes and see the professor's slides or educational material. You have a section where you can chat with other students or the professor. And then you also have a camera section where you can see the professor talking, and the professor at that point can bring students up as they're talking and really have a dialogue. Whoever's speaking, their video comes up on the screen, so you really get to see the face and hear what they're speaking as well.
Sure. And as the professor, I have another screen, right, where I can see everybody's video stream.
Yeah.
And when people want to volunteer something,
Yeah.
that's how you can enable to
Yeah.
have an actual discussion, right?
Right.
Because everybody in the program has a lot of real world experience. Right. So if you talk about something like technology integration,
Right.
for example, there are probably a couple of people who've gone through difficult SAP implementations and that kind of thing. And so that's I think it sort of facilitates discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I was going through the program, at the same time, I was implementing Microsoft Dynamics at the organization I was working for. So talking with Bill, I had the opportunity to share lessons learned, to share some of the pains we were going through, and then also get other perspectives from students that were in the class that had been through ERP implementations or had a technology background that could kind of weigh into the discussion. So it was really, you had the material that you were learning, but you also were able to then reinforce that with other student experience.
Great. And I think the majority of the people who are instructors in the program are actually practitioners, right? So Dan Stahl, who teaches the finance and performance management class, was in mergers and acquisitions for a long time. I teach the IT systems class, and I've worked as a consultant in that capacity. How do you feel, because I think in terms of having the real world perspective and sort of, war stories about, let me tell you when this happened, how do you feel that enhanced your experience?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a chance to interact with other professionals that have different experience than you, always enriches your experience, and to be able to have that in the academic setting really reinforces the concepts that you're learning, really helps you understand different perspectives as you're working on assignments.
Great, yeah. I think we're fortunate enough in the program to have a pretty senior board of executives who are involved in sort of transportation and supply chain at some of the biggest companies here, Boeing, Costco. During the residency, we do a couple of things that are sort of not purely normal classroom. We take a tour of the Port of Seattle. We rent a sort of a sightseeing boat and go and see the port sort of from the water in rather than the other way. And then typically we take a tour of some kind of facility, in the Seattle area. Last year we took a tour of Amazon's facility down in Kent, which was pretty interesting, where your inventory is basically stored in rotating robots. I thought that was very impressive. During your year, where did we go?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to tour a Costco fulfillment center in Sumner, Washington. So we were able to go in there and see the cross-dock inbound, outbound flow. So it was really an opportunity for us to learn how Costco does their supply chain.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty impressive facility.
Yes.
So you had mentioned earlier having the opportunity to meet people. Obviously, you can meet people in your cohort. You meet the professors, members of the advisory board. How has that networking opportunity kind of helped you from a career perspective, from a personal perspective?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always value in having a professional network. So coming into the program, it gives you a really great opportunity to either start and build your network or to expand your network. And for me, it was about expanding my network. So expanding it with current students, with faculty, and then also the board members. And for me, I had a target list of companies that I wanted to work for, and to be able to dialogue with folks that had connections at those companies. But then also, for me, I got a lot of value out of just getting that professional mentorship from board members and faculty that have been on the job longer and have more experience in how to approach problems, how to approach learning opportunities, and then, of course, how to approach career opportunities as well.
Right. And we have a growing network of alumni, all of whom I think are pretty close.
Yes.
You know, if a current student reaches out, either I'll put them together or they'll reach out directly. But it can be pretty valuable if you're looking to either change industries,
right.
You know, if you want to move into retail, it would be good to talk to somebody who's been in that space for a while, or sometimes to change the kind of role you have. You know, if you're in supplier management, you want to move to procurement. The person may not say, hey, I have a job, but they can probably give you some insights into, would this even be an interesting job for me? And sometimes they can point you to other folks who could give you more information.
Yeah, and that was really valuable for me. So I had my target list of companies that did include retailers, and had the opportunity to connect with folks that were in that industry, and they were able to introduce me to other senior leaders at some of these companies and have coffee chats, and really helped me learn more about the industry. So I had, automotive background, humanitarian supply chain background, so I didn't have a lot of retail experience. So having the opportunity to talk with current students, former students, and then also the board really helped me understand the retail space and understand, what I needed to learn, who I needed to connect with. So very valuable.
We have part of the program is a mentoring program where you're paired up with somebody who's an experienced executive. Not everybody does it because not everybody has time. I don't know. Did you have an opportunity to do that?
I did not. I did not take advantage of it. I definitely recommend that you do. For me, in my work schedule, adding the mentorship element was something I didn't feel like I was going to be able to fully commit to. And I had already leveraged networking through other avenues. So definitely encourage the mentorship opportunity that's presented, but I did not.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because I think for some students, we asked, there's sort of a questionnaire, we asked very specifically, if you could have your ideal mentor, what would that person look like?
Right.
And usually, unless it's something really exotic, usually we're pretty successful in putting people together. Somebody who wants to, dig more into sort of the actual transportation function, we can pair them with somebody who's a VP at a local company, which usually I think is pretty helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know for me, talking with Bill and gave him my career goals, my professional goals, and the mentor that I would have been paired with, I was already meeting with through the program anyway.
Good.
For coffee, so it was more of the informal route. So very helpful, though.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. One of the aspects of the program that I think students tend to like a lot, and that I personally like because I think it's the place where you apply everything you've learned to solve an actual problem the way you would in Amazon or anywhere else is the practicum. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience there? I don't remember what project you guys worked on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll first maybe take a step back and talk about some of the simulations that you run through the program. So you have the traditional learning through books that you read, case studies that you'll read, papers that you'll write. But you also have the opportunity to get into small teams within the cohort and run different simulations. And you're basically running supply chains for these virtual companies. And, Bill does a great job of bringing students in and adding an element of competitiveness into the program. So I'm happy to say that my team won one of the simulations, but all that culminates into this practicum, which is an opportunity for you to form teams within your cohort. It's teams of 3 to 4 students, and you actually solve real company problems. So for me, one of the members of my team worked at Starbucks, so we had the opportunity to work on a supply chain problem specific to overseas transportation at Starbucks. So being able to work on the practicum, meet with faculties to show them our business case, show them our problem definition, and then take that all the way through solutioning and implementing a solution was very valuable and gives you experience solving problems at a company in this area.
Right, because I mean, one of our key objectives with the program when people graduate is to enable people to sort of move up and act as sort of change agents within their organization. I mean, things are changing very quickly. Your company is changing things very quickly for a lot of industries, and I think being able to bring those skills together and having that actual practice, I think it approximates reality pretty closely.
Yeah, it does. And for us, it was an actual problem that needed to be solved. It wasn't an anecdotal problem, but it was an actual real-world scenario that we were able to make meaningful change for Starbucks. And upon graduating, I started at Amazon, and a lot of the skills and tools that I learned in the program I use daily.
Right. Do you want to talk about the culminating activity for the practicum is students get an opportunity to put together 10 slides, and they have 20 minutes to present their idea with a business case to our panels of our advisory board, which is a little bit intimidating sometimes for people, but it does replicate real life. If you have an idea, you're going to need to go sell it to some executives who are going to ask hard financial and operational questions.
Right.
What was that like?
For me, it was a really great opportunity to just expand my network by presenting a business problem to very senior executives at some very large corporations. And for me, having 10 slides, it forces you to be concise and to not hide behind your PowerPoint slides, and you can't sell your way to success with the members of the board that are watching your presentation. So you have to know your material, you have to know your problem, you have to know your solution, and then present it out to senior executives. So for me, it was a great opportunity to test what I had learned and an opportunity to practice that in front of the senior executives.
That's great. That's great. You've had a really interesting career. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now specifically for Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Amazon, I'm a senior product manager on our global supply chain team. So I have the opportunity to work with our suppliers and optimize the inbound supply chain for Amazon. So every day is new, exciting, and different, and fast-paced and challenging, and I've loved my time so far.
That's great. Are there specific aspects of the curriculum or anything else that you feel you can sort of apply in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that two classes that really stand out for me and how I apply them pretty consistently at Amazon would be the supply chain risk class taught by Dr. Goodchild.
Right.
And that's about how do you make decisions when you have limited data, and how do you understand and calculate the various risks associated with a decision. So being able to understand how to use a decision tree, how to formulate the calculations, how to manipulate the calculations that are going to give you a statistical output of how to make your decision or what recommendation you should be making. So for me, it was about the risk class from Dr. Goodchild, and then also secondly would have to be the practicum would be the two most valuable pieces.
Okay, that's fantastic. So any thoughts for people who are contemplating, doing a program like this or doing this specific program?
Yeah.
Any thoughts, advice, things you've learned based
Absolutely.
on having gone through the program and graduated?
Yeah, I think so. My advice would be to understand what your professional career goals are, and then to take a self-assessment of where you currently are. What are your gaps in knowledge? What are your gaps in skills? And do you need to close those gaps with a graduate degree? And if so, really understand the curriculum that's being taught, and understand that when you invest the time, is the output going to be what closes those gaps for you? And for me, knowing that I wanted to stay in supply chain, looking at the program, I realized that I had a little bit of a gap in my academic supply chain theory knowledge, and looking through the courses that this program offers, it really helped me close that gap and allow me to round out my ability to use data to make decisions.
Great. Well, as we mentioned, we're very focused on, helping people sort of grow their career by virtue of, the academic piece. the networking piece, that kind of thing. I thought I would mention I have some relationships with some people who are local recruiters who deal with supply chain specifically. We're going to be putting on a webinar, I believe it's the 13th of March, but you can go to our website. We should have that up shortly. That's going to be sort of discussing sort of salaries within the supply chain. What are some of the most sought after positions? What kind of tools can you use? And whether you're interested in the program or not, it might be people are always interested to see, where do I stack up?
Sure.
Am I being paid enough?
Of course,
if I'm
that's
not,
right.
what do I do?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So so stay tuned for that. Any other observations before we go to questions?
No, I'm excited to be able to share my perspective and wish you all success in making the decisions.
Great.
Okay. A question from Kate Slater. As many companies are moving away from hiring buyers for their supply chain and looking more at having commodity managers, does the UW program help learn about market commodities as well?
Do you want to take that or do you want me to?
You can take a shot.
Okay. Yeah, I think the idea of buyer it'd be interesting to hear what your experience is at Amazon, but I think the idea of being somebody who just buys stuff, I think that idea may be sort of going away in a lot of companies, because a lot of times if you're a buyer and you're measured on getting the cheapest price on widgets, you can get the cheapest price on widgets and still cost the company more money than if you bought the more expensive widgets. So I think people are starting to look more at sort of supplier relationships, things driving supplier innovation. I teach a collaboration class that talks a lot about that. It talks a lot about maybe getting away from the traditional adversarial relationship between a seller and a buyer of, I beat you over the head until you give me the lowest possible price. At the end of the day, maybe that may not spawn the kind of innovation you want. So, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, I think definitely echo everything you just said, and would add that as you think about as technology is changing and as you think about automation, technology is not going to replace as defined, but it repurposes how you think about buying. So instead of doing I'm cutting this PO and I'm getting this inventory and here are my prices, but how do you optimize the end-to-end supply chain and the specific function of the buying role? So, for me, it's about how do you use the data and how do you implement incentives and incentive programs with your supply base that can scale across all of your vendors. So instead of having your one-to-one vendor relationships, how can you scale across all of your vendor base and continue to automate to improve, service levels and your seamless transactions between supplier and company?
Yeah, that's where I think taking a real deliberate approach to performance management and incentives. That provides results internally, but it also provides results externally. Yes. Definitely. Next question.
What was your favorite course in the program and why?
My favorite course in the program, I would have to say, would be a tie for two. One would be one of Bill's classes, and I don't remember the exact name. I think it was SCTL 504, I believe, but it was really about how do you lead a virtual supply chain, and it really brought in the competitive pieces. So how do you run the business and compete against your fellow cohort members? So for me, it was about the gamification and the making decisions on behalf of your virtual company would be my favorite. My second favorite, because it really helped me and helps me daily at Amazon, would have to be Professor Jan's inventory management class. And it was really about how do you build inventory models, how do you build inventory profiles, how do you think about forecast accuracy, demand accuracy, and how that those trade-offs are in your various inventory profiles. So for me, really gave me an opportunity to strengthen that side of my experience. So those would be my two favorite.
Great.
How much coursework can I expect in addition to classes?
Do you want to give your perspective?
I can give my perspective. I think you'll find that most of the students are in the field of supply chain. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll find that you have different depths of experience in different classes, so it will require different levels of effort for you. But I'll say across the program, it's a little bit of a cliche, but you get out what you put in. So for me, I really wanted to use this degree to put me on a trajectory to work for one of my target companies. So for me, you have 2 hours of class, and I would say on average across all of the classes, I spend probably 8 to 10 hours outside of class. So probably an average of 10 hours a week.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think part of that is collaborating with students on group work. Part of that is reading, that kind of thing. Yeah. I do very much agree, though, one aspect, this is different than undergrad, right, where you know, everybody's a blank page, more or less. Somebody who comes into a Perv Jan's class who's worked in inventory for 5 years, they're going to have a lot easier time on that class than somebody who knows nothing about it. So I think one of the things students find is based on their own experience. One class could be, you know, pretty straightforward, and another one could be quite challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree.
Is the program work compatible?
Well, you can answer that. I mean, the program was designed specifically to be work compatible, and here we have a worker who went through the program.
That's right.
You can talk about that.
Yeah, I think so. So the classes are 5 p.m. Pacific time to around 7 p.m. Pacific time. On a specific day of the week, and it's that same time and that same day throughout the 2-year program. And for me, it was a conversation with my senior leadership team, and you know, letting them know that, you know, I'm seeking a professional development opportunity, and it's in the form of a graduate degree. It's going to be a 2-year commitment, so that I need flexibility so that I can be in class from 5 to 7. So if that means you join class from work, you can join class from work. If that means you join from the coffee shop or from home, you can do that as well. So it's I would suggest talking with your senior leadership team to get their buy-in so that you can carve out that time intentionally.
Yeah, and once in a while we have people who are like in the UK for business for 2 weeks. So for them it's not so great.
Yeah, I think.
But I mean, generally speaking, most of the people are in the US, so it's relatively relatively compatible with a normal life, I think.
Yeah, I think I joined from Dubai one week, and it was maybe 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the online learning environment?
So I think we talked about that a little bit. I mean, it was designed, as we mentioned, it was designed specifically to enable interaction. So we use what's called a flipped classroom. So rather than maybe in your undergraduate, you got up and the professor stood up there and, you know, went over a bunch of slides and mostly talked, that part of it you do on your own. So there are recorded PowerPoints that you can watch whenever you want to. And then when you come into the class, it's not a lecture. There might be a little bit at the beginning. I do this a little bit at the beginning where, you know, here are some key subjects that I would like to expand on and make sure I hear your experience about. But by and large, it's a lot of exercises. It's the games and the collaboration class. There are presentations where you get comfortable standing up by yourself and presenting in front of your cohort. So I think it offers a lot of, it's the closest thing to being in a classroom that I think you can get without actually being in a classroom.
Yeah, I agree. And you get the opportunity to go into different breakout rooms. So the professor will put you with a group of students and you're debating a topic, you're putting together a point of view and coming back and presenting that through the class. So there's a moderator that works behind the scenes. So my experience over the 2 years, it was very seamless. You know, the videos, the video feed, the speech, everything lined up, and it was very seamless from my standpoint.
Great.
Question from Amy Lilly. Educationally speaking, what is a must for a student to have under her belt before entering the program?
Maybe we could both give that one a go. So the way admissions work is we take a look, it's sort of a holistic process. So we take a look at you know, your academic performance, we take a look at your work experience. You have an opportunity on the application to talk a little bit about some of the supply chain challenges you've encountered. By and large, I think the average is 7 years. We have some people with a lot more. We have some people with a lot less too. It sort of depends. If you can demonstrate that you're some experience with supply chain, we want to make sure that people who come into the program can be successful, right? And you're with a cohort of people who are experienced people. So I would say having some, you know, having that actual supply chain experience. You don't need an undergrad in supply chain. I don't have one, do you?
Yeah, business
most people don't.
Yeah,
exactly. But I think that's, you know, having some work experience is really key.
Is the material heavy on statistics/calculus?
I would have to. It varies depending on the class, and it varies depending on sort of the content, right? I know some of the class. If you're going to come to this program, you should be comfortable with numbers. There are parts of it that are quantitative. I don't think there's a whole lot of actually using calculus,
Right.
but one of the requirements is either calculus or statistics, specifically to make sure that if somebody puts an equation on the board, you don't feel frightened and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So, it is an engineering-based curriculum, so you should be comfortable with numbers. You won't be doing a lot of calculus, and in a lot of my classes, there's not that much math. It's more conceptual.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, as long as you're not intimidated by different equations that'll be used, I think you'll from my example was when you're in the statistical portion of the class heavy is where you want to understand the different inventory models and the calculations so that when you enter your numbers into a spreadsheet and it spits out a result, you can understand how that number was calculated and you can back into the calculation. So there is some statistics, and I think having just an entry level understanding of statistics would be all you would need.
Right.
Is this program aimed at people early or mid-career?
That's a good question. I think we've had people who are both. Sometimes, and that's the thing, if you're out there and you're interested in this program, I get on the phone with anybody who wants to talk a little bit, and what I try to do is understand where are you trying to go, right? Because this program may be a good fit for you. You might be better off getting an MBA. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
How does it compare to an MBA?
I think it's much more specific. Like if you want to go into finance, or an MBA gives you a high level overview of the key components in business. How does business work? This one's a lot deeper. If you're not interested, or you're not working in supply chain and logistics, or you're not interested in working there, this is not the program for you. This is very, very focused on a specific discipline. I think in some ways when you get out, people have a very clear idea of what you are able to do, because the program is pretty focused.
Yeah. And I would say that if you didn't want to stay in the field of supply chain, and you wanted to go the MBA route, you can always get an MBA with an emphasis in supply chain. But I would agree with Bill that if you want to stay in supply chain, you want to get deeper in supply chain, this would be the degree path to take.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Mike, just thank you so much for coming.
Me.
It's great to hear you share your personal experiences.
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, well, great. Well, thank you for joining us. There's more information on our website, and if you need to get in touch personally, we're happy to do that and happy to talk about your objectives. Thank you.